Hey y'all, welcome to today's video where we're going to explore and go down the rabbit hole of side hustles. So today's video, as I mentioned before, is talking about side hustles. So not only my personal path, but in talking with other entrepreneurs, side hustles are a great thing that you can do in parallel to your day job. So you have the steady income while you also have the opportunity to grow a business line on the side as something that you could eventually transition into full-time employment. The struggle for me, at least, and I'm sure there are others out there, that it was tough coming up with an idea of what to do either as a side hustle or as full-time employment. So naturally, the first thing that we do is we ask our friends and family, what are some things to do? And probably weren't happy with those answers. So the next place we go is to the internet. So surely the internet's full of articles that would say, here's a great thing that you can do to make tons of money and live happily on a beach in Thailand somewhere. So what I've done recently is gone through a list of search results that highlight some of these articles that organize different side hustles basically by several different categories. So one might be organized by stuff that you can do from home, stuff that you can do with little time involvement, stuff that might be specific to catering to women or to men. Some of them were even organized by how profitable they are. So you can tell by how the different search terms were showing up that you could find something that was more applicable to your situation or your geographic area, things that would work where you're at. And as you keep searching down the rabbit hole, you'll notice that they become more and more specialized, more and more specific, which might seem to indicate that it would come closer to finding something that would be workable for your solution. But what I really found is that they just became more specialized in terms of things that were clumps of bad advice. So always being a person to do things differently, I wanted to organize some of these. I'll save you the trouble of reading through all of these articles, and I'll name off probably the top 25 or so of these business ideas that came up that said this is a great idea for you to do as a side hustle. But I've organized these into a slightly different method, which goes more along the lines of what I've spoke about in other videos. So this goes to further reinforce what I've been telling you all along. So I wanted to organize these into three basic categories. So the very first one is you are working for another established company, simply exchanging your time for services to this company and making money on the side. The second category is that you do actually have ownership of what you were doing, but there's not very much strategic potential in these. Then the third category is where you have full ownership, but you can possibly grow this into a strategic venture. And I'll get into that as to why they're organized into those categories a little bit later. So let's dive into the first category. So these allow you plenty of freedom of time, but in the very end that you're still working for another company, you're also subject to their rules, and this can be yanked out from under you at any point in time. So examples of these types, and there were 4 or 5 that were listed. So things like becoming a rideshare driver, being a grocery deliverer, delivering packages, or even joining a remote customer service position. And a good example as to why these aren't strategic things to do in terms of being a grocery deliverer, that's very dependent on your geographic location. So for instance, it actually works very well here in the city that I'm located at, but maybe 30 miles away, there's simply no infrastructure for that to happen. It's too large of a geographic area with not enough resource there in that central area for it to work. You might be able to get something going in one of those areas. However, you're limited by whether that company actually services that area, and it's highly dependent on which retailers in that area have an online presence, especially in terms of grocery delivery. To get some of these started for things like food delivery, prepared food that is, prepared food delivery requires that the restaurants put their menu online. They basically digitize everything that they have. Again, we're talking very small geographic areas that may or may not have restaurants beyond mom and pop cafes, and they may not have full hours of availability. Package delivery driver, you can look a little bit beyond this to understand that most of the packages that are delivered by FedEx, UPS, and the U.S. Postal Service. And the reason for this is because the shipper saves so much that they can offer free shipping, or if the buyer's paying shipping, they can offer far more advantageous rates just due to size and volume than you ever could on your own. So you might have a delivery service going, but you're not going to be very profitable. So these exist to make money basically, but you still at the very end don't have any ownership. You don't have anything that you could grow from there. So the next category that I would move into, these are opportunities where you would be able to have some ownership, but in terms of being strategic, you don't have any potential for growth in terms of handing this off to someone else. Again, I've talked in several other videos about whatever that you build, make sure that you build it kind of modular so that you're able to replace tasks that you do with somebody else being able to do them. So you don't want them to become very specialized unless that role grows into something specialized. Basically, the situation that we want to avoid is where you have ownership of this because you possess a certain set of skills that can't easily be replicated. You have intimate knowledge of something that only you have, and this is not easily taught to somebody else because it's heavily experience-based or requires many, many hours of research that just simply aren't worth the time to pass on to somebody else because it wouldn't be that profitable or it wouldn't be that big of a part of a business. So things in this category would include things like being a freelance writer, being a virtual assistant, social media and search engine rater, Airbnb host, Airbnb experiences host, notary public, wedding officiant, flipper of either houses, cars, or anything else that you can think of value that you could buy low and sell high, competitive gamer, and last we have audio or caption transcriptionist. So with these types of opportunities, you do have ownership in that you're providing value to either another business or to customers directly, but often the knowledge required to operate and to excel in these isn't easily transferred into another person. Basically, there's no such thing as a Vulcan mind meld where you can instantly transfer this information to somebody else to where they could excel in this role. So that's why I say that there's no growth potential in these. You couldn't open up a business tomorrow operating a group of people in this category and expect to be strategic and make money. They're designed more for an individual. And then if you go granular on this list, one in particular, a notary public. A lot of times, why would you spend the money to gain a notary certification? Yes, you can provide documentation, but there seems to be not a lot of profit margin in this. The other goes back to a personal hatred and passion of mine are flippers. I know people that have flipped houses, that flip cars. They're called used car dealers. The thing that you have to realize about any sort of flipping is you always have to consider your supply. So while you are dependent on what the market will support in terms of prices that you're able to sell things for, you have to understand that a lot of your business growth potential is limited by the supply of things. So a great example, my local record store here in town. I love going there. I love seeing what he gets in because things change over time. And I've had a lot of conversations with him. I'll say, hey, I'm looking for this particular record. If you happen to come across it, let me know, put it back behind the counter. I'll gladly pay you next time I come in. And the thing that I hear from him is that in our local area, it turns out people had really horrible music taste years ago when vinyl LPs were big. Back in the 70s and 80s, people just had awful taste in this area. Love it or hate it, country music's very popular around here, but in a modern age, country music isn't as popular. So the people that are actually searching out and buying vinyl albums aren't necessarily the people that are listening to the music that was popular in this area 20 years ago. So the struggle exists for him to find things that will actually sell. He has to buy, I want to say 10% of everything that he buys will actually make it on the shelf and become a sellable product. The rest of it ends up in the discount bin going for anywhere from $1 to $3 per. I've said all that to say this, that it exists as being a restriction to the supply of whatever you're trying to sell. If you like buying and reselling old stuff, remember that there's only a certain amount of old stuff that's available for you to buy and sell. And saying all that, I do want to circle back and make one other point, is that if you only want your business to grow to a certain point, it depends on your strategic goal. I may talk about growing something into a strategic adventure where you're becoming more of an entrepreneur, where you're becoming more of a mogul, that you're generating a lot of passive income. That might not be for you. That might not be your end goal, and that is perfectly okay. That's why I listed these categories as being something that you can still do, you can still make money, you can still have ownership, you can still dictate your schedule. All of the things that we're really working towards, that's great. I just want you to understand that this isn't something that's really going to go beyond you if that's what your goal is. So now let's move into the next category, and these are business opportunities that have ownership and they have limited, but they do have some strategic potential. So opportunities like this include being a freelance social media manager, pet sitter, babysitter, online tutor, online English teacher, at-home clothes cleaner, crafts, bakery, or non-food service related seller. And lastly, we have t-shirt designer and seller. So I put these in this category because these don't require as much specialty knowledge, or any specialty aspects of these opportunities can be handled by a subcontractor or eventually a part-time employee. These focus more on the opportunity that exists rather than trying to carve out a niche for you. These are listed to show you that demand exists for these services. And notice that most of them kind of start blurring the lines between product and service, which I've said before that businesses usually fall into one of two categories, and that is you are either providing a service or you're providing a product. So here we see that you branch out more into services. You see them becoming more prevalent in this section. And to me, that's a good thing for strategic potential, because if it's easy to do, then that means you can find other people that will easily do this. The only X factor being finding somebody that's responsible and consistent to be able to do this. So when I say that these opportunities have strategic potential, you can always start off by yourself and figure out the ins and outs of the business. You can also find the sizzle, if you will, of what makes your service unique and sets you apart from others that might compete in the same space, because you can also focus on these locally, but these might expand out to something beyond your geographic location. And then when you're ready to make the transition, you can bring more people on board performing this service so that you're able to handle more capacity. And then that frees you up to explore other markets or other service offerings, as I've said many times before. And so for the final category, I only found one or two that really said these are opportunities where you can have strategic vision, you can have full ownership, and these can be grown into something beyond yourself quite easily. They translate well, basically. The first one of those are online course creator and drop shipping. And so what I mean by an online course creator is that you have specific knowledge, but instead of you performing that specific knowledge as a service for somebody else, you create content teaching others to perform this service themselves. So any specific knowledge is then transferred. The creativity comes in you deciding which medium, whether it's audio, visual, graphic, any combination of those, to be able to effectively teach others to have the same knowledge that you do. The second one in this category has to do with drop shipping. I like drop shipping because this facilitates the transfer of goods from the supplier directly to the end consumer. You're just the facilitator. You don't have to have a lot of startup costs to begin this. This is kind of an evolution of the mom and pop or brick and mortar type store where you don't have to front the money up front for these products. You just merely curate the selection of these. I've seen trends where this has become popular in people creating their own subscription boxes. So you personally know which products you would like to see in a subscription box. Then you can follow things like the 7 steps to instant market testing to find out if this is something profitable. Find out if there are people out there willing to give you money for these types of curated collections shipped directly to their home. This gives you an opportunity to highlight products that might not be known in the market, emerging products that other people have invented. You can simply be the facilitator and both win. So you not only help their product get to market and help get their name out there even more, you're earning basically a commission off of these products, and you're selling the sizzle off of it, which I really like. You don't have to invent the product, you don't have to develop the product, you just have to see that it's viable and that there's enough out there to meet demand. The other important thing that I would like to talk about out of reading all of these articles, one thing that I noticed is that each one of these not only breaks it down by category by saying this is something you can easily do at home, this is something that's very profitable, or this is something that you can do for a very specific situation as a great opportunity. The other part of it is that there's tons of life advice in all of these articles too, but be very careful because a lot of this is bad. And I want to read off one that I came across without being specific or without calling out the original author, because these are all opinions and they're all like thumbprints. We all have one. So this is just a snippet of the one that I saw here. And this says, passion and interests. And this says, it's best to start a side hustle that aligns with your skills, interests, or hobbies. The best way of making money is by monetizing your passion. That really struck me, and I had to read that several times to really grasp the full impact of that, where it's telling you that monetizing your passion is a good thing. I actually have several authors that I've read and talked to several entrepreneurs that tell you that's actually very bad advice. So it is a good way to make money by monetizing your passion, but what happens is that your passion gets ruined. So think about it. I personally enjoy cooking. I do a lot of cooking here at the house. We very seldom eat out. It's a great way to save money, and you can control your diet. There are many benefits to this. If I decided, hey, I'm a decent cook, other people tend to like my food, so therefore I should start a food truck or a restaurant, what I would notice is that if I'm doing it for other people, that my passion for cooking would be ruined. Eventually I would get tired of cleaning the dishes, I would get tired of coming up with new recipes, and because I'm sort of the creative driving force behind it, my only options are bringing somebody else in and hoping that they adhere to the same principles that I do, or simply just hang it up, walk away, and not be profitable with that anymore. So the second one we have in this list is profitability. And what this says is to make sure to estimate the potential earnings within an industry before committing. So you can use sites like Vault and ZipRecruiter, and they're great places to start your research. So I actually do agree with one of the points here, and that's using Vault and ZipRecruiter for market research to see what the demand is, what your potential earnings could be. That's all great information, and I really wanted to include this one just to say, this is something that you should include in any sort of business opportunity that you plan on pursuing. How profitable is this going to be? You want to maximize your profitability, not necessarily to be greedy, but if something's worth your time, then what you want to do is to make it very much so worth your time. You don't want to invest a lot of time off of something that doesn't make a lot of money or doesn't generate a lot of revenue for you. Rather, the goal is to really spend the least amount of time possible to make the most amount of money. So another point that I'll disagree with on monetizing your passion is that a better solution to this, I hate to point out something and say this is bad, don't do it. I'd rather say this is bad, but here's something better. I want to provide a better alternative or substitution for this. In the $100 startup, a good solution to this is proposed, and the author Chris here says that it's a better idea to find something that supplements your hobby or your passion, something that enhances that. And that's kind of where you can find an opportunity to carve a niche out for yourself. So a great example of this, I'm involved in ham radio quite heavily. I'm a general class FCC license holder. So what this means is instead of me going through the trouble to produce radios, to produce training materials based on the hobby, that might work. But one thing that I've seen very common is that small little doodads here and there, such as antenna designs, people will figure out a cheap way to manufacture an antenna that's easy to put up and saves you from having to scrounge for materials. They might have a good deal of materials and suppliers and be able to put together something for a very reasonable cost that other people will find value of. This is a way not simply to just monetize your passion. This is a better way of supplementing that, providing value not only to yourself, but to other people who enjoy the same hobby or passion as you. So with any of these opportunities, what you really want to focus on is the growth potential and the ability of something to be not only scaled up, but something to not completely dominate all of your free time. With side hustles, these do start off as something else that you're doing outside of your primary employment with the hopes of growing into something larger someday. So the key point here is to not become so specific that it requires more of your time, or to maintain the same level of service that you're heavily involved to the point where you have time for nothing else and you can't grow the business. So kind of wrapping up today's video, in conclusion, what I would really like to say is that instead of trying to monetize your passion, finding something you're good at and making money off of that, what I would rather tell you to do is to find something that you're good at, but you may not be passionate about it. The point is that if you're going through all of this, you want to make money. You want it to be worth your while, and you want it to be worth your time investment. So by finding something you're not necessarily passionate about, but you are good at, might be a better path. That way you don't have the same emotional involvement when it comes time to either sell the business or to move on. It's not like trying to get rid of one of your kids. So what I'd like you to take away from the video overall is this. There are countless websites out there advertising things that you could begin as a side hustle and potentially grow into full-time employment. However, I want you to balance that knowledge and what's presented in these articles by understanding that some of these might not be applicable to your situation. Some of them might require more time investment than you're willing, or might require resources that you don't have available to you, or would cost too much to ever become profitable. Rather, I want this to serve as a way to refine some of these existing ideas to say, this is more bulletproof. To me, the best approach to finding a good idea has always been to shoot down all the bad ideas as hard as possible. Be honest with yourself. Be honest and back up any ideas that you have with research, and that will increase your chances of success. I'd like to take a second just to say thank you for watching my video. Make sure you please like and subscribe, and when you get a moment, check out my website, CameliaStartup.com.